First Apostle down. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. Dash. Aeron stood amidst the wreckage, his purple eyes glowing with an unearthly light. The air was wrong, as if the world itself was struggling to contain the abomination that had just been unleashed. The Shadowborn horror loomed before him, a twisted colossus, its form constantly shifting. Dozens of jagged mouths gnashed and screamed, and its limbs, like the claws of some forgotten nightmare, scraped against reality itself. The sheer malice radiating from it felt like it could drown the world in darkness. Aeron let out a breath, his grip on Direfang tightening as he tilted his head. Fucking hell, he muttered, half in awe, half in irritation. For something like this to exist in this world. The beast howled, a sound that made the air itself tremble. Its massive arm lashed out, a black tendril ripping through the remains of the temple and smashing the ground where Aeron stood. He vanished in a blur, dodging with a flicker of ruler's authority, appearing atop a crumbled stone pillar. His lips curved into a wicked smile. All right then, he raised a hand high. Let's see if you can handle all of them. His purple eyes blazed, and his voice rang out like thunder. Come out. The earth shook beneath his feet. From the blackness surrounding him, shadows poured forth a legion of death, his army. Hundreds of shadow soldiers emerged, their eyes glowing faintly, snarling for battle. Shadow wolves and shadow cats prowled at the forefront, their fangs dripping with shadowed venom. Aeron's shadow giant rose behind them, hefting its massive, jagged log club with a deep, earth-shaking growl. The ground split as his soldiers clad in blackened armor, emerged with blades gleaming with malice. Aeron extended his arm and pointed toward the horror. Tear it apart. The shadows charged. The horror shrieked, swinging its colossal limbs. But Aeron's wolves struck first, leaping onto it, ripping and tearing into its shifting form. Black ichor sprayed, but the monster barely flinched. A shadow cat pounced onto its back, claws shredding through the writhing darkness. The horror twisted, one of its mouths snapping shut and devouring the beast whole. Only for more to take its place. Aeron was already moving. He blurred through the battlefield, daggers flashing. With a twist of his wrist, he hurled one of his silverfang daggers. It buried deep into the horror's shoulder, black tendrils already eating away at it. Feeling that, are you? Aeron grinned as the beast trembled, its movements slowing. Poison's a bitch, huh? A massive black chain shot from the horror's chest, aiming to bind him. Aeron laughed and simply snapped his fingers. With ruler's authority, the chain reversed mid-air and wrapped around the horror's own limb, yanking it down and exposing its flank. His giant seized the opening, bringing the log club crashing down with an earth-shattering boom. The horror reeled, howling in rage as shadowed beasts swarmed it from all sides. Aeron dashed in, Direfang appearing in his hand. He slashed low, severing a writhing limb, and then pivoted, hurling his second dagger directly into one of its eyes. The horror spasmed, tendrils flailing wildly. You're just a big target, Aeron taunted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Guess you're not as powerful as you seem to be, just a weak abomination. Another tendril lashed toward him. He caught it mid-air with ruler's authority, twisting it violently and ripping it from the beast's body. Aeron grinned as he watched the horror stagger, the poison seeping deeper into its form, weakening it further. Borrowed power's a dangerous thing, he said, appearing above the beast in a blink. And you're just about empty by now. He threw Direfang as hard as he could but missed, or so it seemed. The blade spun past the horror's head until Aeron raised his hand, fingers clenching into a fist. Ruler's authority grabbed hold of the sword mid-flight, redirecting it in an instant, straight through the back of the horror's skull. The beast froze, an unearthly wail echoing through the ruins. Aeron landed softly in front of it, shadows swirling around him like a king overseeing his fallen enemy. And now, he murmured, reaching out as Direfang flew back to his palm. It's really over for you. With a single, fluid motion, he lunged, burying the blade deep into its head. The horror convulsed one final time, and then collapsed, its colossal form disintegrating into fading wisps of shadow. Aeron stood there, breathing steadily as the battlefield fell silent. His shadow soldiers lingered for a moment, their glowing eyes watching for any sign of life until he lowered his hand. They vanished back into the void. Aeron rolled his shoulders, glancing at the scorched ruins around him. Well, he muttered, flicking blood from his blade. That was something. As the last remnants of the Shadowborn horror faded into nothingness, Aeron's legs trembled and for the first time in a long while, he felt it. Exhaustion. His vision blurred slightly, the edges of his sight darkening as his body screamed in protest. With a grunt, he dropped to one knee, clutching his side as a sharp wave of pain tore through his ribs. Shit, he muttered, coughing blood onto the cracked stone beneath him. It was dark, almost black against the ruin's cold surface. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, shaking his head in disbelief. That bastard was really strong. His voice was rough, strained. I didn't think they could be this powerful. For a moment, the only sound was his ragged breathing and the faint hiss of fading shadow energy. His muscles ached, his body feeling like it had been torn apart and stitched back together with nothing but sheer will. But he wasn't done. Not yet. With a slow, deliberate motion, Aeron pushed himself back to his feet, his purple eyes still burning with cold fire. His boots crunched against broken stone as he stalked toward Vaedrus's corpse, or what was left of it. The once proud apostle lay sprawled and broken, his lifeless body twisted at an unnatural angle. Aeron's lip curled into a smile. You made me bleed, he murmured. I guess it's only fair you pay me back. With your servitude. He lifted his hand, and the air around him grew heavy. Thick with power. Darkness swirled beneath his feet, spreading like a creeping void, consuming everything in its path. Arise. The word echoed through the temple, cold and absolute, a command no soul could defy. A black-like void rippled outward, engulfing Vaedrus's corpse. The air trembled as shadows twisted and warped his broken form. For a heartbeat, everything was still. Then, a figure emerged. It was Vaedrus, or rather, a shadow-forged version of him. His form was pitch black, as though crafted from living darkness, but his eyes burned a familiar, eerie crimson. The edges of his shadowed robes flowed like smoke, and his aura was just as cold, just as dangerous as when he had drawn breath. He dropped to one knee, bowing his head before Aeron. His smile widened. Well, you'll still be called Vaedrus. He let the name linger, savoring the weight it carried. Let's see if you're as useful in death as you were annoying in life. As he turned his gaze to the rest of the battlefield, more shadows stretched out, claiming the bodies of the dead priests. One by one, they rose from the black, hollow-eyed and bound in eternal servitude. A flurry of notifications flashed before his eyes. You leveled up. You leveled up. You leveled up. You have defeated one of the 8 apostles of the gods, Vaedrus of Ashai, apostle of the shadow gods. Aeron exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar surge of power coursing through his veins, his body mending itself slightly, the exhaustion easing just a little. One of the 8 apostles, 7 more. He laughed under his breath, shaking his head. If the rest are anything like you, this might actually get interesting. He cast a glance at his new elite knight, Vaedrus, who remained kneeling in the shattered remains of the temple. Get up. Aeron's voice held no room for argument. We're not done yet. As the temple's ruins lay in smoldering chaos, Aeron stood tall, surrounded by his shadow army, his enemies now his servants, his power growing with every battle. And somewhere in the darkness beyond of Shadowlands, something else waited. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. 6 comments 0 vote. The Gathering Storm. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. Aeron sat on the broken remains of what used to be an altar, the stone now cracked and smeared with blood, his blood, and the blood of his foes. The temple was nothing but ruins now, half collapsed and burning softly in the aftermath of his battle with Vaedrus. Smoke drifted lazily through the shattered walls, the scent of ash and death thick in the air. He let out a slow, heavy breath, his hand pressing against the deep gash along his ribs. Pain flared, sharp and unrelenting, but it was nothing compared to the burning realization crawling through his mind. I really shouldn't underestimate them from now on. He muttered, wiping a streak of blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. His purple eyes glowed dimly beneath the shadowy veil of his hair, flicking toward the corpse-strewn battlefield. If one of these so-called apostles could push me this far, the others won't be any easier. He leaned back against the cracked altar, trying to steady his breathing. His body was still aching, his bones felt heavier, as if the battle had carved through more than just his flesh. But beneath the fatigue, beneath the sting of torn muscle and bruised pride, there was exhilaration. A slow, crooked smile tugged at his lips. Still alive at least, he mused. He raised his hand and with a flick of his fingers, the system window sprang to life, glowing faintly in the dim light. Lines of radiant text scrolled before his eyes. You have obtained new skills. His smile widened as 3 new skill notifications flashed into view. Let's see what we've got. He tapped the first one. Bloodlust can magically intimidate enemy combatants, inducing intense fear that decreases their stats by 50%. This technique can affect multiple opponents simultaneously. Aeron laughed under his breath. So, the more I fight, the more of a monster I become. Fitting. His fingers twitched, itching to test this out. The next skill shimmered into view. Mutilation targets vital points and inflicts critical damage by slashing with your weapons. His grin stretched wider. Nice. He twirled one of his silverfang daggers between his fingers, imagining the sheer havoc this would cause in future battles. I like it. Then the final notification appeared. This one felt different. Darker. Chains of the abyss forged from the darkest essence of the shadow gods, these living chains writhe and slither like serpents of shadow. They can bind, crush, or drag enemies. The chains extend and retract at the wielder's command, capable of piercing magical defenses and restraining even ethereal beings like ghosts or demons. Aeron's eyes narrowed as he reread the description, feeling the faint pull of this new power. Slowly, he raised his left hand and whispered, "Let's try it now." A shiver tore through the air as black tendrils erupted from his palm, living chains forged from pure shadow. They slithered and curled around his arm like serpents, hissing softly, gleaming with a faint shine. Damn, Aeron let out a low chuckle, watching the chains twist and writhe. I didn't think I'd walk away from this with a gift, the same skill he used against me. He clenched his fist, and the chains snapped back into his palm, disappearing like they were never there. And took one final look at his status window. Aeron Grim. Job: Necromancer. Title: Kingslayer +5 Strength, +5 Agility, +5 Sense. All-knowing, instantly understand new concepts, +50% learning speed, automatically identify items, creatures, and magic. Level: 40 right pointing arrow 52. Fatigue: 70. HP: 4400. MP: 4600. Strength: 105 right pointing arrow 120 +5. Health: 72 right pointing arrow 96. Agility: 65 right pointing arrow 90 +5. Intelligence: 80 right pointing arrow 100. Sense: 32 right pointing arrow 77 +5. Available ability points: 36 right pointing arrow 0. Skills: Ruler's Authority. Perception: +10 to sense when analyzing or strategizing. Bloodlust. New. Mutilation, new. Chains of the Abyss, new. Job-specific skills. Shadow Extraction 344 400 Soldiers Limit. Shadow Exchange, Level 1. Monarch's Domain. Aeron's eyes scanned the numbers, fingers twitching slightly as he considered where to allocate his new points. I could pump everything into intelligence, but nah. He rolled his neck, feeling the strain ease just slightly. I need to hit harder. Move faster. Those bastards aren't going to go down easy. Without hesitation, he began distributing the points. The moment he confirmed the allocation. His wounds didn't fade entirely, but the ache became distant, a reminder, nothing more. Aeron clenched his fist, feeling the familiar hum of power thrumming beneath his skin. Much better. His voice was low, satisfied. He swiped to the next section, eyeing his ever-growing Shadow Army. Shadow Army, 344 400s. Vadris of Ashai. 10 Sorcerers of Ashai. 50 Shieldmen, 50 Brutes, 40 Archers, 100 Knights. 70 Dothraki Riders, 10 Assassins. Garm the Direwolf, 4 Wolves, Fang, 4 Shadowcats, 2 Ice Bears. Shadow Giant. Aeron with a satisfied look he exhaled, rising slowly from the altar, his strength returning in waves. With a roll of his shoulders, he glanced around the ruined temple. This place had nothing left to offer him. Nothing but broken stone and the faint echoes of the fools who had thought they could stop him. Vadris, his gaze shifted to the shadow-forged figure of the former apostle, who stood silently a few feet away, waiting, obedient and wordless. Shadow gods, huh? Aeron mused, cracking his neck. If this was their idea of a warm-up, I can't wait to see what the other gods offer next. Storm's End. The wind howled across the rocky cliffs, carrying the scent of salt and rain as Storm's End loomed against the darkened sky. The ancient fortress stood tall and unyielding, its towering walls carved to withstand both siege and storm. Yet a massive army gathered beyond its gates. A sea of banners fluttered violently in the wind, golden lions of House Lannister, the golden roses of House Tyrell, and the crowned stag of House Baratheon. Thousands of men in gleaming plate and chainmail stretched as far as the eye could see, an alliance of the Crownlands, the Reach, and the Stormlands, all marching under one cause, to crush the unknown enemy lurking within Storm's End. At the head of the host, mounted on a sturdy black horse, Sir Kevan Lannister surveyed the fortress with a critical gaze. His crimson cloak snapped in the wind, the lion sigil on his breastplate gleaming with authority. Beside him rode a knight from the Tyrells, resplendent in green and gold, and Sir Faring, who commanded what remained of the loyal Baratheon forces. Kevan's expression hardened as his horse shifted beneath him. So, this is the great threat, he said, voice steady despite the rising wind. A fortress as still as a tomb. I expected more. The Knight of Tyrell smirked faintly. I heard the message myself. Some sorcerer king claiming Storm's End. Dark magic and shadow creatures, children's tales to frighten small folk. We think it's a very well-organized, well-armed deserters, took the fortress by surprise. Maybe 100 or more. A grizzled knight from the Stormlands spat on the ground. I agree, we should have burned that letter when it arrived. Whoever sent it's a madman. I've fought in 2 wars, never seen a fortress take itself without steel and blood. Kevan narrowed his eyes. Madmen are often dangerous. And this one holds Storm's End without resistance. We have received a survivor in King's Landing. I don't think it's bandits or deserters. Whatever the truth is, we need to clear this place. That alone makes him worth our time, but where are they? A knight from the Crownlands laughed behind them. Perhaps the storm scared them all to death. His words drew chuckles from the ranks, but Kevan did not smile. The winds shifted. The light in the sky dimmed, the sun hidden behind a wall of blackened clouds. An unnatural cold swept across the battlefield, a chill that settled into their bones. The laughter faded, replaced by an uneasy silence. Kevan's hand drifted to the hilt of his sword. Something felt wrong. Commander. A scout rode up swiftly, face pale beneath his helm. The gates. They're opening. Every head turned toward the towering gate of Storm's End as the ancient iron doors groaned and creaked. A gust of shadow poured from the darkened archway. Something moved within the blackness. A hush fell over the army as figures began to emerge. At first, they thought it was a trick of the storm, a play of shadow against stone. But no. These were knights, their armor black as midnight, eyes burning with a cold, violet glow. They marched in perfect silence, the clanking of their weapons swallowed by the void they dragged with them. And there weren't that many. 100 at best. By the gods, Kevan breathed, his composure faltering for the first time. It's real. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. 6 comments 0 vote. Pissed. Download the app for additional rewards. More events, more perks. Winning you more free perks. Download now. FrenzyAren. Download app now. 100 against thousands. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. The earth trembled beneath the weight of thousands. The banners of House Lannister, House Tyrell, and House Baratheon snapped violently in the wind as the sky hung heavy and gray, an omen of blood to come. At the head of the Golden Host, Kevan Lannister sat rigid in his saddle, his knuckles white as he gripped the reins. His warhorse shifted nervously beneath him, snorting since it, too, sensed the unnatural presence crawling toward them. And there they were, 100 Shadow Knights. They marched in eerie unison, black armor glinting faintly beneath the storm's pallor. Each step was silent, precise too precise. Their violet eyes glowed in the darkness as they advanced without a hint of fear. 100. A suicidal number to leave the safety of the walls. Any seasoned commander knew this. You don't abandon the castle's advantage unless you had a death wish. 50 men could hold a castle for weeks, yet these things. They came onto the open field willingly, against thousands. It was madness. What in the name of all 7 hells? A Tyrell muttered, the swagger in his voice replaced with genuine unease. Kevan exhaled sharply, trying to steady himself. They're baiting us, he said, though even he wasn't sure. Whatever these things are, they want us to come to them. A Stormland knight rode up, panic lacing his voice. Shall we hold, my lord? This is sorcery. They can't mean to fight us in the open, even if they are not men, we have the numbers. Kevin's gaze hardened. Hold. He shook his head. No. Whatever magic this is, it should bleed like anything else. He unsheathed his sword, the Valyrian steel blade gifted by Tywin himself, and raised it high. The polished black and red steel gleamed wickedly in the dim light. Archers. His command rang out like thunder. Draw. Thousands of bowstrings creaked in unison, the archers lining the ridges and the flanks readying their arrows. Loose. A storm of iron-tipped death blackened the sky. The hiss of thousands of arrows cut through the wind, raining down on the approaching Shadow Knights. The first volley fell a lethal downpour. No living man could stand against such a barrage. And yet they did. The Shadow Knights moved with inhuman fluidity. Many of the arrows struck, but where flesh should tear, the shadows only shuddered. Some knights took the brunt of the assault, black armor riddled with arrows, but they did not fall. Kevin's eyes narrowed. Impossible. A knight let out a breath of disbelief. They're still standing, what are they? Another knight barked, panic rising, they should be dead by now. Kevin bared his teeth. Damn them to hell. Fine. If arrows won't do it. He lowered his sword. Lannisters. His voice rang with the authority of battle. You wanted a fight. Here it is. He pointed the blade toward the advancing shadows. Send them back to the hell they crawled from. A thunderous battle cry erupted from the army, a deafening roar of thousands eager to drown their fear in blood. For the Reach. For the West. For the Stag. And for Storm's End. The ground shook as the golden host surged forward. Knights in shining armor, footmen with swords and spears. An avalanche of steel and fury charged to meet the unnatural threat. The first clash came hard and fast. A Lannister knight swung his sword at the nearest shadow soldier, a crushing, overhead blow. The Shadow Knight raised a jagged black shield, absorbing the impact with terrifying ease. Before the knight could recover, a shadow blade pierced through his chest, clean, silent, and deadly. Screams rang out as more shadow soldiers met the charge. They moved like wraiths, cutting through men with inhuman precision. Spears shattered. Blades broke. Armor failed. Yet, the army pushed back. They can die, Kevin snarled. Keep pushing. The air hung heavy with tension as the Shadow Knights advanced, their blackened forms cutting through like death incarnate. 100 in total, moving in a relentless tide of darkness that marched without sound or hesitation. Kevin Lannister's fingers tightened around the hilt of his sword, his knuckles pale beneath his gauntlet. Gods help us. It was one thing to hear whispers of shadow demons tearing men apart. It was another to see them. Steady. Kevin barked, masking his unease. Whatever these things are, we outnumber them 100 to 1. We'll walk away with victory. A ripple of uneasy laughter spread through the ranks forced, but it was enough to keep the fear from overtaking them. A Baratheon knight cursed under his breath. They don't die. Enough. Kevin's voice cut through the rising panic. Spears forward. Hold the line. We stop them here. The front ranks braced as the Shadow Knights closed the final distance. The first clash came like a thunderbolt, steel met shadow, and the living screamed. The Shadow Knights carved through the ranks with terrifying precision. Blades of black ice cut through plate and mail like parchment. Men fell in droves, cut down before they could react, blood staining the field in gruesome arcs. A Lannister bannerman thrust his spear at one of the shadows, only for his weapon to pass through as if striking air. In the next instant, the Shadow Knight's sword carved through his neck, sending his head rolling across the grass. There. They're demons. A soldier shrieked before a shadow's blade silenced him forever. Kevin gritted his teeth as he swung his sword, steel meeting shadow. His blade felt like it hit solid iron, but the Shadow Knight didn't falter. Another came from the side. Kevin barely raised his shield in time to deflect a strike that could have torn him in half. What in the name of all the gods are we fighting? A Tyrell commander roared, driving his sword uselessly against a Shadow Knight's breastplate. It did nothing. The Shadow's blade answered, cutting him down where he stood. Kevin's heart pounded in his chest as he pulled back, blood splattering his face from a dying man beside him. His forces, 3,000 strong Lannisters, were being slaughtered. And not a single Shadow Knight had fallen. Not one. The Shadow Knights moved with inhuman grace, lethal, and utterly silent. They did not speak. Did not bleed. They only killed. A knight of the Stormlands raised his warhammer, bellowing, for Storm's End. He swung with all his might, only for a shadow's blade to pierce his heart before the blow landed. His corpse hit the ground with a dull thud. A panicked cry rang out from the rear. They can't be killed. We have to fall back. Kevin felt a cold weight settle in his gut. His well-trained men, battle-hardened soldiers who had faced war and rebellion, were breaking. And for the first time in his long career, he could not blame them. Hold the line. He roared, but his voice, so sure and commanding mere moments ago, felt hollow against the unyielding advance of death itself. Aeron walked through the blackened expanse, his steps unhurried, eyes closed as a faint smile tugged at his lips. Good, I don't have to go back. The thought hummed in his mind like a quiet triumph. Whatever was happening at Storm's End, he didn't need to lift a finger. His shadow soldiers were doing exactly what they were meant to do. Kill. Pitiful men of Westeros, he mused. But I understand why the so-called gods want me dead now. Those poor fools, they really have no chance. The sound of his boots striking the ground echoed faintly in the oppressive silence, the air thick with something ancient and malevolent. He opened his eyes, and immediately, the smile faded. The Shadowlands. Even with all the horrors he had seen, creatures born of death and darkness, this place was different. A sickly, red-black sky stretched overhead, churning like a wound that refused to close. There was no sun, no moon, only an eerie crimson glow casting jagged, bleeding streaks across the horizon. The air was heavy and foul, thick with the stench of sulfur and something far worse. Jagged black rocks jutted from the earth like broken teeth, the ground cracked and scorched, pools of inky liquid dotted the landscape, too thick to be water, too still to be natural. Occasionally, something inside them shifted. The very ground seemed to pulse beneath his feet, as if the land itself was alive, and watching. I thought a shy was bad, Aeron muttered, narrowing his eyes as he scanned the nightmarish wasteland stretching endlessly before him. But this place. It's 10 times worse. I can barely see a damn thing. His usual sharp vision, bolstered by his powers, struggled to pierce through the unnatural gloom. The darkness here wasn't just an absence of light, it was something deeper, more absolute. It clung to his skin, whispering in a language he couldn't quite hear, like 1,000 unseen eyes watching his every step. Far in the distance, a jagged silhouette pierced the sky, a towering black mountain. So, this is place of legends, Aeron murmured to himself. Will I find the gods, little playthings here, or something else? A chill ran down his spine, not from fear, but from the weight of understanding. If this was the source of certain creatures, then whatever waited inside that mountain, might make Vadris look like a child. And that only made his smile return. Good enough, he whispered, his voice carrying into the dark. Dear Shadowlands, make my trip here worthwhile, and show me something interesting. Dash. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. 8 comments 0 vote. A shadow in the sky. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. Dash. The battlefield outside Storm's End was no longer a place of men, it was a slaughterhouse. The 100 Shadow Knights moved through the ranks like a plague-given form. No mercy. No hesitation. No weakness. Each knight was a black storm of death, swords cleaving through plate and mail. Blood sprayed in arcs, drenching the ground, yet the shadow soldiers did not slow. They did not tire. A bannerman raised his greatsword, screaming as he charged one of the knights. The shadow soldier turned, its blackened armor gleaming with an unnatural sheen, and impaled the man through the face. The greatsword fell from the bannerman's hands, his body twitching as he was lifted off the ground like a child's doll. Another soldier, a Tyrell archer, fired an arrow point blank into a knight's visor. It should have killed him. Instead, the knight simply turned its head, the arrow still lodged in its face, and cut the archer down with a single, fluid strike. The Lannisters, famed for their discipline, were breaking. Fear rippled through their lines as the realization sank in, these things could not be stopped. Hold the line. Hold the line, damn you. A captain screamed, his voice cracking with panic. He never finished the order. A shadow knight appeared behind him, silent, swift, and with a twist of its blade, his head tumbled to the blood-soaked ground. Kevin Lannister watched it all unfold from atop his warhorse, his face pale beneath his helm. This was no battle. This was annihilation. There really was no other explanation to what was going on. A knight of House Baratheon rode past him, his face contorted in rage and terror. We outnumber them 100 to 1. Why won't they fall? Kevin's grip on the reins tightened as his mind raced. They should be falling. No matter how skilled, no matter how fierce, numbers should have won the day. Yet, here they were, an entire army of Westeros, finest warriors being butchered as if their lives meant nothing. He had heard the reports of shadows killing lords and knights inside their own halls, including what happened to their own former king, Joffrey. He had believed it to be the work of assassins because he didn't witness it himself, not this. God save us, he thought grimly. A scream tore his thoughts away as a shadow knight swept through a group of archers. Arrows fired wildly into the air, missing their mark as fear overtook them. Another Lannister spearman lunged at one of the creatures, only to have his weapon shattered by the sheer force of the knight's counterstrike. Kevin's jaw clenched. He had fought in wars and is still fighting the War of the Five Kings. He had stood beside his brother Tywin through countless battles. But this was a whole new nightmarish experience. This isn't a battle, he muttered, his voice low and cold. It's a sign of the end times. The shadow soldiers weren't defending Storm's End, they were sending a warning. Kevin turned sharply to his bannermen. Fall back. He commanded, his voice cutting through the din. Get the wounded what men you can, pull them back to the ridge. Now. But, my lord. A knight began. Do it. Kevin snapped. His usual composure fractured by what he had seen. His eyes lingered on the slaughter below. I will not waste more lives against something we cannot kill. This, sorcery is real. And by the gods, my brother must know of it. The retreat began in chaos. Men scrambled to pull back, fear gripping them tighter than their weapons. Some dropped their swords altogether, too broken by what they had seen to even fight. But not all made it. For every soldier who turned to flee, 2 more fell to the relentless advance of the Shadow Knights. Their black swords carved through man and beast alike, horses toppled mid-gallop, men dragged screaming into the abyss. Kevin wheeled his horse around, scanning the battlefield one last time. If this man, or demon, whoever he is, has more than these wraiths, Westeros itself may burn. He spurred his horse, his heart pounding in his chest. They had come to crush a rebellion, to stamp out some rogue sorcerer who dared defy the Iron Throne. Instead, they had found a nightmare made flesh. And it was winning. Inside Storm's End, the people watched in horrified silence. Peasants, guardsmen, and nobles alike crowded the battlements, their faces pale as they beheld the massacre unfolding below. The shadow soldiers, creatures of death and darkness, were defending them. That man didn't lie. A guard whispered, his voice trembling. The maester, a thin man with a sharp nose and a hunched back, clutched the cold stone wall for support. His eyes were wide, blood drained from his face. By the gods, he breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. We are not meant to see such things. Further back, in the shadows of the keep, a figure crouched, watching. A low rumble filled the air as Fang, Aeron's shadowcat, stretched lazily. His glowing eyes tracked the retreating army with a predator's interest, tail twitching. To him, this was nothing more than a game, one his master was already winning. The cat let out a low growl, its muscles rippling beneath the dark sheen of its fur. The humans could not understand it, but Fang did. The battlefield was still soaked in blood, but the killing had stopped. Amid the broken bodies and shattered steel, the Shadow Knights, all 100 of them, moved as one. But instead of pursuing the retreating army, they turned. Without a word, without a sound, they began marching back toward Storm's End. Their blackened blades dripped with the blood of hundreds, eerie synchronization that defied the chaos they had just unleashed. Whatever dark will commanded them, it had no interest in further slaughter. From the ridge, Kevin Lannister risked a glance back as his horse pounded across the blood-soaked earth. Sweat clung to his brow, his heart thundered in his chest. For a moment, he had expected the shadow soldiers to give chase to cut them down to the last man. But they didn't. Instead, they turned like a tide receding back to the shore. They're returning to the castle, one of his bannermen stammered, riding beside him. His voice cracked with disbelief. Why? Why aren't they following us? Kevin's face was grim, his mind sharp despite the horror. Because they don't need to, he said, his voice cold. They've already won. The retreating soldiers, men who had once laughed at the idea of shadows and sorcery, were no longer laughing. Faces pale, mouths dry, some couldn't stop shaking. Even as they fled beyond the range of Storm's End's walls, they knew the truth. They had faced something unnatural and they had lost. On the battlements of Storm's End, the gathered crowd watched in stunned silence as the Shadow Knights approached the keep's towering gates. "They're returning," the maester murmured, his voice thin and unsteady. His bony fingers trembled as he clutched the edge of the wall, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Gods preserve us, they're returning to the keep." The guards, still gripping their spears tightly, exchanged uneasy glances. None of them had moved since the slaughter began. None dared. These things had just butchered an army, and now, they were coming back. "They are not gonna kill us now, are they?" One guard asked, his knuckles white around his weapon. "Right." The maester swallowed hard. "Because their master commands them, I don't think they will," he said quietly. A hush settled over the crowd as the first of the Shadow Knights stepped through the great stone gates. Black armor gleamed dully beneath the overcast sky. Their swords slick with blood hung loosely at their sides. Not a single shadow soldier bore a scratch. Not a dent in their armor. Untouched. A guard, barely older than a boy, spoke in a choked whisper. "We're still alive because he allows it." Another guard spat on the ground, trying to shake his fear. "If he wanted us dead," he growled, though his voice trembled, "we'd be dead already." Shadowlands. Aeron sat tall atop his shadow horse, the beasts form a swirling mass of black smoke and muscle. Its hooves made no sound against the jagged ground as it carried him forward through the Shadowlands. The air here was wrong and oppressive, as if it hung heavy with unseen eyes. Blackened mountains loomed around him, their jagged peaks cutting against a blood-red sky. Rivers of dark water snaked through the cracked earth, hissing faintly as though even the ground itself suffered in this cursed place. Aeron's violet eyes glowed like embers in the dimness as they swept across the desolate expanse. "I feel like I'm being watched from every corner," he murmured to himself, his voice low. There was no breeze here, no life. Yet the crawling sensation on the back of his neck wouldn't fade. Something else was out there. And it wasn't just the usual monsters of myths. His grip on the reins tightened. Whatever this place was hiding, he was ready. Or so he thought. Suddenly a massive blur of black streaked through the sky above him. Fast. Too fast. Aeron's gaze snapped upward, his eyes narrowing as the shadow glided overhead. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't a beast. His eyes widened slightly as a cold shiver trailed down his spine. What the hell was that? He whispered, his voice barely audible. His horse shifted beneath him, uneasy, as if it too had sensed the shift in the air. Aeron held its reins firm, keeping it still while his gaze followed the creature's path. Dash. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. 9 comments 0 vote. A dragon. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. Dash. Aeron spurred his shadow horse forward, its form rippling beneath him like living darkness as it galloped across the desolate, cracked ground. His glowing violet eyes remained fixed on the shadow that had streaked across the sky moments before, a blur too large, too fast to be anything ordinary. I need to see what that was, he muttered, the anticipation thrumming in his veins. The wind or what passed for it in this accursed place whipped against his face as the black mountains grew sharper in the distance. Whatever creature had flown past wasn't just some mindless beast. But as he pressed onward, a sharp chime rang through his mind, followed by a cold, mechanical voice. System notification. New quest, defeat the hostile black wyverns. Aeron's brows furrowed. Wyverns. His grip on the reins tightened. This place just keeps getting better. A distant, high-pitched shriek pierced the air. Then another. And another. The sound grew louder, closer, until the sky above him seemed to tremble with movement. From the jagged cliffs ahead, shadows burst forth, sweeping toward him in a black, writhing mass. They came fast, too fast. Aeron's eyes widened slightly as the first of the creatures dove toward him. Smaller wyverns, no larger than a warhorse, with bat-like wings stretched wide and coal-black scales that gleamed like polished obsidian. Their eyes burned crimson, their razor-sharp claws glinting as they descended upon him. TCH. Aeron pulled the reins hard, bringing his mount to a sharp stop. In one fluid motion, he leapt off its back. His feet landed softly on the cracked earth as his silverfang daggers materialized in his hands, their edges humming with power. Don't bullshit me. His lips curled into a cold, humorless smile. What I just saw is far bigger than these things. The first wyvern lunged. Aeron didn't hesitate. He twisted his body, moving with a deadly grace as he slashed upward. His dagger carved through the beast's throat in one clean motion. Black blood splattered across the ground as it crumpled lifelessly. Two more dived at him from opposite sides. Aeron's ruler's authority flared to life. With a flick of his wrist, the air around him trembled, an invisible force seized one of the wyverns midair, dragging it violently into the path of the other. The creatures collided with a sickening crunch, sending them both tumbling into the dirt. Another wyvern came from behind, jaws open wide to tear into him. Without turning, Aeron threw one of his daggers over his shoulder. The blade whirled through the air in a silver blur, piercing the beast straight through its eye. It fell with a deafening thud. More swarmed. Aeron's violet gaze burned brighter as he lunged into their ranks. He moved like a shadow, impossibly fast, smooth. One dagger ripped through a wyvern's wing while his other blade sank deep into another's chest. He spun, ducking beneath razor claws, his daggers cutting through scale and sinew with brutal efficiency. A wyvern screeched as it dove low, aiming to crush him with its talons. Aeron smirked. Got you. With a burst of ruler's authority, he yanked the creature from the sky, slamming it into the ground so hard its bones shattered. Before it could rise, his dagger plunged into its skull, pinning it to the earth. The ground shook beneath his boots as more came, a dozen, maybe more, circling him like ravenous predators. You want more? His voice dripped with confidence as he raised a bloodstained dagger. Fine by me. They did. Aeron stepped into them like a storm. His daggers flashed, each strike precise, lethal, cutting through their defenses like paper. Claws scraped against him, but he barely felt it. When a beast lunged for his throat, he caught it mid-air with ruler's authority, twisting its neck until it snapped. A wyvern tried to flank him from the side. Aeron turned, hurling a dagger with pinpoint accuracy. It buried itself in the beast's wing joint, sending it crashing to the ground. He was untouchable, a blur of motion, each movement flowing seamlessly into the next. Still, they came. Still, they died. The battlefield became a graveyard of broken wings and lifeless bodies. Yet Aeron barely seemed to slow, cutting down the last few with merciless precision. Blood dripped from his silver fangs, pooling at his feet as the final wyvern crumpled in a heap of black scales. Aeron exhaled sharply, flicking his wrist to dismiss one of his daggers. TCH. What a waste of time. A sharp hiss cut through the silence. His senses flared. Aeron spun around a little bit too late. A wyvern, larger than the rest, had crept behind him. Its jaws stretched wide, black venom pooling between its fangs. For a split second, Aeron's eyes narrowed, expecting the familiar glow of dragonfire, but instead, the beast spewed a jet of seething, greenish-black liquid straight at him. Shit. Aeron twisted his body, barely avoiding the stream of corrosive venom. The air burned where it passed, the ground beneath sizzled and melted, leaving jagged holes in the cracked earth. A low, amused chuckle escaped his lips. You're nothing like a dragon, how disappointing. The wyvern reared back, preparing to strike again, but Aeron was already moving. He closed the distance in a heartbeat, ruler's authority flaring to life. With a sharp gesture, the beast froze mid-lunge, crushed under an invisible weight. Its wings buckled, bones snapping as it thrashed helplessly. Still a bit dangerous, I'll give you that. Aeron's voice was cold, almost bored as he stepped forward, dagger in hand. One smooth slash, and the wyvern's head tumbled to the ground. Its massive body collapsed in a heap, venom still dripping from its fangs. Silence fell. Aeron stood amidst the carnage, surrounded by smoking craters and the ruined corpses. And then, ding! A cascade of notifications flashed before his eyes. System notification. You leveled up. You leveled up. You leveled up. Item acquired. Abyss Drake armor set. Aeron blinked. Armor. A pulse of dark energy rippled through the air, and before him materialized a sleek, black armor crafted from what looked like obsidian scaled plates, each one jagged and razor sharp. The armor reflected no light, as if it devoured it entirely. The helmet resembled a dragon's head, with an angular snout and burning green eye slits that seemed to pierce through the darkness. The gauntlets and boots were shaped like wyvern talons, jagged and deadly, exuding an aura of raw power. Drake's resilience. Near immunity to poison, magic, and fire. Shadow Step. Allows the wearer to blend into shadows and move unseen. Aeron tilted his head, inspecting the armor with a raised brow. Forged by shadow binders from a shy. A dry laugh escaped his lips. Sure thing system. He reached out, brushing a hand against the cold, smooth surface. Without another word, the armor disassembled into shadow, flowing like liquid smoke and encasing his body in one smooth motion. The moment it settled, he felt the power humming beneath his skin like a coiled beast waiting to strike. The weight was perfect, light as air, yet dense with magic. Aeron glanced down at himself, chuckling softly. Ridiculous looking. He tapped a clawed gauntlet against his chest. But I'll still wear it since it can turn invisible. He focused for a moment, and the shadow step ability activated. The armor shimmered, then Aeron vanished entirely from view. Only his violet eyes remained visible, glowing softly in the darkness. Aeron turned his gaze back toward the looming mountain. His violet eyes gleamed beneath the shadowed visor of his new armor, scanning every crevice, every shadow. And then he felt it. A pulse. Something deep. Primal. As if the mountain itself was alive. A sudden stillness fell over the land. Not the quiet of peace, the calm before a storm. Ruah aarrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr night. It was no ordinary roar, it was a declaration. A sound so raw, so immense, it seemed to echo through his bones. The air trembled. Rocks quivered. Even the shadows themselves seemed to shrink back. The roar was so powerful, so wrong, that lesser men, hell, even seasoned warriors would have lost their minds on the spot. Some would have run until their legs gave out. Others would have dropped their swords and begged whatever gods they knew for mercy. Aeron's eyes snapped wide, glowing like twin beacons in the dark. His heartbeat quickened not from fear, but from anticipation. Now I'm sure. His voice was a low murmur, edged with something dangerous. The corner of his mouth tugged into a grin beneath his helmet. That's one big fucking dragon. Dash. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon ad. Web links. 6 comments 0 vote. A great dragon. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon ad. Web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. Dash. Aeron exhaled slowly, his breath misting against the inside of his dragon-shaped helmet. His gaze stayed fixed on the mountain ahead, the source of the monstrous roar still echoing in his bones. I need to get inside there somehow. His voice was quiet but resolute. Whatever was waiting for him at the heart of this cursed place, he had no intention of backing down. He turned, eyes narrowing as they fell on the scattered corpses of the black wyverns he had just slaughtered. Their bat-like wings lay limp, slick with blood and shadow, and their coal-black scales gleamed dully under the faint, eerie light. For a moment, Aeron tilted his head, considering. I think I can fly using them. His lips curled into a smirk beneath his helmet. Even if they're not that big. Without hesitation, he strode toward them, the heels of his boots crunching against the broken earth. Dark energy coiled at his fingertips as he stretched a hand toward the fallen beasts. Arise. The ground trembled. Shadows surged like black fire around the corpses, and then they moved, or rather their new shadowed form did. One by one, the shadow wyverns rose, their eyes now burned with cold violet light. Their wings snapped open with a bone-rattling whoosh, and they let out low, guttural growls that rumbled through the air. Aeron stepped closer to the largest one, its black-scaled body flexing as it adjusted to its new existence. With a swift motion, he leapt onto its back, the creature easily supporting his weight. He leaned forward, fingers curling into the rough ridges along its neck. Good. Now, he gestured toward the mountain peak, toward the gaping maw at its summit, a black hole that seemed to swallow even the faintest light. Take me there. With a powerful beat of its wings, the wyvern surged upward, dragging Aeron into the sky. Several others followed, a shadow flock, circling beneath him like dark specters. The wind tore at his armor, but even as he ascended, the oppressive darkness of the Shadowlands remained. There was no open sky here, no stars, no sun. Just the endless void hanging over this forsaken place. Aeron let out a breath, his violet eyes scanning the horizon. Even here in the sky, it's still pretty dark. His voice was thoughtful, almost distant. This place is unreal, no wonder nobody returns once they set foot here, assuming they manage to tread this far. His wyvern let out a low hiss as it ascended higher, carrying him toward the gaping chasm at the mountain's peak. The hole was massive, wide enough to swallow a castle whole, and as he neared it, an acrid heat brushed against his skin beneath the armor. Aeron peered down into the abyss, and his heart gave a slow, heavy thump. It was huge, a cavern carved out by something older and more terrifying than mere nature. Faint molten rivers glowed far below, casting a crimson hue on the jagged black stone. The air hung thick with the scent of sulfur and ash. But it wasn't the size of the cavern or the heat that stole his breath. It was the shadow, a shape that dwarfed everything else. The shape moved, slow, deliberate, and the faint crimson glow glinted off scales darker than midnight. Wings, larger than any ship's sail, shifted slightly as the beast stirred. A massive, horned head lifted from the darkness, and a pair of burning emerald eyes flared to life. Aeron's eyes widened, his pulse quickening. By the gods! He whispered, voice edged with awe. Aeron hovered in the air for a while, the wings of his shadow wyvern beating steadily beneath him as he descended deeper into the volcanic chasm. Even through the oppressive darkness, his violet eyes gleamed like twin beacons, scanning the black abyss below. But then he felt it. A tremor. A weight on his very soul. Aeron's breath hitched as an overwhelming presence swept over him, a primal, crushing force that gnawed at the edges of his sanity. It wasn't just power. It was authority. Something ancient. Something wrong. Then it moved. A massive shadow shifted in the depths. The sheer size of it was unreal, but it wasn't just the scale, it was the feeling of being seen. The weight of its gaze settled on him, and for the first time in a long while, Aeron felt small. A thunderous growl rumbled from the darkness, deep and guttural, vibrating through the air like the sound of the world cracking apart. And then, a pair of emerald eyes ignited. They burned like twin infernos, piercing through the shadows with a venomous, predatory glow. Cold. Ancient. Intelligent. Aeron's whole body tensed. Every muscle screamed to move, yet he held his ground, glaring back. It was watching him. Suddenly, a cold chime rang out in his mind. Ding. One of the 8 apostles is nearby. Aeron's eyes widened, heart pounding against his ribs. Really? His voice came out in a breathless murmur, barely audible over the roaring heat of the chasm. That's one of them. Marine, the Great Pyramid. The city of Marine stretched far below, its golden pyramids gleaming under the scorching sun. Yet, high above, within the throne room of the Great Pyramid, Daenerys Targaryen sat upon her seat not of iron, but of polished stone and pride. The mother of dragons, the breaker of chains, yet at this moment, her mind was far from the victories she had earned. Her fingers tapped softly against the cool armrest as she gazed into the distance, eyes unfocused. The murmur of her advisors faded into the background as a singular thought gnawed at the edges of her mind. Is he really coming back? Aeron Grim. The name itself felt like a shadow lurking in the corners of her thoughts. The last time he stood before her, what he displayed. Monsters born of shadow, warriors that did not bleed, did not fall. And his words, spoken with such terrifying certainty, still echoed through her memory. I'll return, Daenerys, and when I do, I'll be even stronger. Then, the 7 kingdoms will be mine. A chill crept down her spine despite the heat of the day. Her dragons were miracles, creatures of myth reborn into the world. And yet, what Aeron had shown her what he was, felt like something beyond the realm of men. Beyond even her dragons. What could he possibly bring that's more terrifying? My queen. The soft, familiar voice of Missandei cut through her thoughts. Daenerys blinked, pulled from her daydream as the young woman stood before her with that ever-graceful posture. Her eyes were warm but concerned. Shall we give the command? The ships are ready, the Unsullied stand prepared. We can begin our voyage to Dragonstone at your word. For a heartbeat, Daenerys hesitated, an unfamiliar feeling twisting in her chest. She had been so certain before, so driven. But now. No, she said softly. Then stronger, not yet. We wait. A heavy silence fell upon the room. Wait. Jorah Mormont's rough voice cut in, his brow furrowing in disbelief. My queen, now is the time. Dragonstone is ours for the taking. Every day we delay gives the usurpers more time to strengthen her hold on the realm. Why wait? Daenerys didn't answer immediately. She looked away, her silver hair cascading over her shoulder as the tension in her heart weighed against the logic in her mind. Jorah took a breath, his voice quieter, more cautious. Don't tell me, it's about that sorcerer. Daenerys's expression darkened as her jaw tightened. She didn't need to answer. The silence spoke for her. You're afraid of him, Jorah said, not accusing, but the words hung heavy in the air. Afraid. Her voice was quiet, but it cut like Valyrian steel. She turned her eyes on him, fierce, unyielding. No, Sir Jorah. I am not afraid. But I am not blind, either. She stood, her hands clenching at her sides. I saw what he did. You did too. Her tone grew colder, edged with a hint of something unspoken. Shadowed men and beasts with no breath in their lungs stood by his side, blades did not stop them. And, they knelt. To him. Her voice softened but only slightly. Even my dragons were not so terrifying to the people of this city. Jorah shifted uncomfortably, but she didn't let him speak. Aeron Grim promised to return. Her violet eyes burned with an intensity that made even the hardened knight look away. And I want to know what he's bringing with him. Wouldn't you? Missandei's expression was unreadable, but her fingers twitched slightly, perhaps a sign of unease. Jorah, however, shook his head. Curiosity won't win you the Iron Throne, Your Grace, he said quietly. Nor will waiting on the word of a man who would bend the world to his will with dark magic. Daenerys's lips pressed into a thin line. And rushing into war without knowing the full strength of my enemies will see me dead. Jorah held her gaze a moment longer before sighing and taking a step back. He lowered his head slightly. As you command, my queen. For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind beyond the stone walls, dry, warm, carrying whispers from the far corners of Essos. Daenerys turned back toward the window, her mind still wrestling with the unknown. What are you planning, Aeron Grim? And when you return, will even my dragons be enough? Dash. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. 7 comments 0 vote. The Cannibal, Apostle of the Old Gods of Valyria. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at web links. You can get access to 3 more chapters or 7 more chapters if you want. Dash. The Red Keep, Small Council Chamber. The chamber was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the flickering glow of tall candles and the pale light spilling through the narrow windows. At the heart of the room, the small council was gathered, powerful figures seated around the long oaken table. The air hung heavy with tension. At the head sat Tywin Lannister, the Hand of the King. His expression was as cold and unyielding as ever, his sharp green eyes fixed on the parchment in front of him. Cersei Lannister, resplendent in crimson and gold, lounged beside him, her beauty as dangerous as her ambition. Across from her, Petyr Baelish wore his usual mocking smile, while Varys, draped in his silk robes, folded his hands calmly in front of him. The weight of the realm pressed on all of them. But today, a new shadow lingered over the kingdom. The Starks remain in the Riverlands, Tywin said, his voice like a blade scraped against stone. Though there is a truce. For now. Returning the Stark girl bought us time. They know if they march further south, we will crush them. Baelish chuckled softly, fingers idly playing with the silver mockingbird pin on his chest. Sentiment buys their patience, it seems, he mused. But a wolf's nature is to bite eventually. Don't think for a moment they've forgotten what happened to their father. Tywin's gaze barely flickered. Let them remember. Honor means nothing if they die screaming. Cersei raised a goblet of wine to her lips, her voice smooth but laced with venom. And what of Stannis? She asked. Or must we continue pretending he isn't a threat? Varys shifted slightly, his tone as soft as silk, yet weighted with meaning. The usurper's brother clings to life on the wall, my lady. His forces are pitiful, a few loyal men, nothing more. Unless he manages to charm the wildlings to his cause, he is a king of snow and ghosts. He smiled faintly. I doubt even their savagery would tip the scales in his favor. Baelish's smile widened, eyes gleaming with amusement. Stannis Baratheon, begging the wildlings for help. Now there's a thought worth savoring. Cersei scoffed, swirling her wine. Let him rot in the cold. His flames won't save him. Yet it is not the Starks or Stannis that concerns me most, Varys murmured, his words drawing the room's attention like a noose tightening around a neck. A storm rises from the east. One with dragons. And now, something else is here. Tywin's gaze sharpened. Speak plainly, spider. Varys inclined his head, the usual calm masking something graver beneath. Storm's end has fallen, my lord, while you were absent fighting north. But not to any army we know. Not to any banner we recognize. The room fell into a tense silence. Even Cersei lowered her goblet. We received reports from Sir Kevin, Varys continued. He led a combined force, Lannisters, Tyrells, Baratheon men, to break whatever unnatural hold had taken the castle. He hesitated, just a breath. They failed. Utterly. Failed. Tywin's voice grew colder, dangerous. Kevin does not fail. What did they face? Varys leaned forward slightly, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. Wraiths, my lord. Shadows given form. Knights that do not bleed. They cannot be killed. Only kill. An entire army fled before them. Sir Kevin barely escaped with his life. Cersei's face paled for a moment, but pride masked her fear. My uncle was never a coward. He is no coward, Varys assured her. But he has seen things that defy all reason. By his own words. No man could stop them. Baelish laughed softly under his breath, though the usual glint of humor in his eyes had dulled. Ghosts. Is that what we fear now? I'd rather wager my gold on swords and men. Shadows cannot hold a kingdom. Varys turned his gaze to him, calm as ever. These shadows hold storm's end. And whoever commands them, holds more power than you know. We have witnessed how our former King Joffrey died. Tywin remained silent for a long moment, weighing every word. Then, with the authority only he possessed, he spoke. What do we know of the man who leads them? Varys lowered his head. Very little. A name, Aeron Grim, but even that is shrouded in mystery. My little birds whisper that he is no lord, no knight, no king. Yet he wields sorcery beyond comprehension. His intentions remain unknown, but whatever he seeks, he will not be content with one castle. A shadow flickered over Tywin's face. The same man that sent me those letters. He will not have another. Cersei's voice cut through the room. This Aeron, if he is even a man, what does he want? Gold. Power. The throne. Varys gave the faintest shrug. Perhaps. Or perhaps he seeks something else entirely. But one thing is clear, his smile faded completely. He is no ordinary foe. And if we do not understand him, we cannot stop him. A silence fell, a rare and heavy silence, filled with the weight of enemies unknown and dangers unseen. Finally, Tywin stood, his golden lion pin catching the candlelight. Summon the banners. Double the garrisons along the Stormlands and the Reach. If Aeron Grim dares march north, he will find the full might of the crown waiting. I will not let some nameless sorcerer threaten what is mine. Baelish smiled, though his fingers drummed nervously against the table. A wise move, my lord. But if shadows could tear through an army, what happens when they come for us? Tywin's cold eyes burned like embers. Then we burn them out or we do. Varys remained still, though in the shadow of his sleeves, his hands curled tight, because for once, even the spider had no answers. Shadowlands. Aeron leapt from the back of his shadow wyvern, the air whipping past him as he plunged toward the blackened ground below. His boots hit the stone with a heavy thud, sending a spiderweb of cracks rippling beneath his feet. Smoke and heat hung thick in the air, like the mountain itself was alive, but all of that faded in the face of the colossal shadow looming before him. The dragon. It was massive, far larger than anything Aeron had ever imagined. Its scales were blacker than midnight, swallowing the faint red glow from the volcanic pit. Ancient, jagged horns curved back from its skull like a crown of bone, twisted and sharp, each one etched with the wear of centuries. Its emerald green eyes burned like molten poison, slitted and serpentine, radiating intelligence as old as Valyria itself. It barely acknowledged him. Aeron stood still, heart thundering in his chest. Despite its size, the beast was unnervingly silent, watching him with the cold indifference of a predator that had seen empires rise and fall. Its wings, tattered and immense, folded close against its body, and its claws, longer than swords, dug into the stone like anchors. A living relic. A monster out of legend. For a moment, Aeron almost believed it wasn't interested in him. That is until silver light flashed. The moment his silver-fanged daggers materialized in his hands, the dragon's gaze snapped to him, piercing, lethal. The air grew heavier as the beast's throat rumbled with a sound that shook the very walls of the mountain. Aeron's eyes widened as the dragon slowly spread its wings, unfurling them with a deliberate menace. They were massive, their shadow swallowing everything beneath them. The edges were jagged and scarred, yet they still carried an undeniable power. The beast lowered its head slightly, its fangs gleaming like ivory swords as it let out a low, guttural growl, a sound that crawled down Aeron's spine. He huffed out a breath, tilting his head. I'd say you're too old to fly, his lips curled into a dry smirk. If I hadn't just seen you flying past me not long ago. Before he could process what the hell he was facing, a chime echoed in his mind. Ding. New quest. Defeat the cannibal, apostle of the old gods of Valyria. Aeron's smirk dropped. His mind froze. The cannibal. His voice echoed through the cavern, half disbelief, half awe. The name itself was enough to chill even the bravest hearts. The cannibal, the oldest and most feared of all the wild dragons. A beast that had haunted Dragonstone, it had fed on its own kind, devouring the weak, the dying, even freshly hatched wormlings. No one had ever tamed it. No one had ever come close. And yet, here it was. Alive. Aeron shook his head, a breathless laugh escaping his lips. You're telling me this thing survived since the time of the Dance of Dragons? His fingers curled tighter around his blades. Unbelievable. The cannibal's wings fully extended as it loomed over him, a titan of fang and shadow. The beast opened its jaws wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth that glistened with venomous saliva. Then, without warning, it roared. The sound wasn't just noise, it was destruction made manifest. The sheer force of it shook the earth, sending loose stones tumbling down the cavern walls. Aeron's vision blurred at the edges as the pressure slammed into him, a sound so raw and primal it could have driven lesser men mad. Any ordinary person would have fallen to their knees, begging for mercy, or death. But Aeron just smiled instead. All right then, he muttered under his breath, the thrill of battle surging through his veins. His heart pounded. As he readied himself to strike, a living legend. I can't wait for you to join my legion. Dash. If you like this story, check out my other stories. Shadow Monarch in DC. If you wish to read more or simply support me, then check out my Patreon at. Web links. To be continued.